Welcome to the studio vlog update 2 for the Kickstarter. In this video, as you can see, I'm going to be sketching out my main characters. This is Arlen, and I'll be sketching Eliezer here in a bit, and I will be painting them. I'm doing this as a reference for the book, so that when I go to work on these characters and paint them again and again and again, up to 100, 200 times in my books, this is just a way for me to reference the character and to get the proportions right every time I go to paint them, and just to get colors right and just to sort of have a consistency throughout the book. You can see here, this is Arlen. He's got that signature sort of poncho covering him. Now, I haven't come up with a solid name for the race that Arlen is, but I have been referring to them as Guardians in a general term. In this world, there are 3 races that are considered the Guardian races. Arlen is one of them, Centaurs are another, and the Shepherds are the third. Shepherds are a much larger version of the race that Arlen is, except they are more tree-like. Here you can see I'm playing around with the details of Arlen's face and proportions, and working on the back view of Arlen now. I had some struggles with the legs. Getting those backward knees to work appropriately was a bit challenging, but in the end I seemed to get there and make them all sort of seem as real as I could for a fantasy character. In a minute here I'll be starting on Eliezer, at least the sketch for him, and you'll see I kind of struggled with those proportions as well. So here you can see I'm starting on those, getting the height proportions and everything. I start with this super round head, and he sort of have this like slack position about him, and I kind of didn't like the shape of his head quite. It was just too round, so I went for more of this sort of like squeezed in at the top proportion. I got the front view pretty clear. This side view really gave me a lot of difficulty. This position here with his face and that nose protruding out really just looked too aggressive. And so I'm just, redraw it. This version here, I erase it eventually. It just looks a little too snake-like with that neck protruding out. But here I'm getting the body proportions more in line. I end up erasing this altogether. It just never could really get it right, and I had to really just stop and think about it. The head proportion here actually is more closely to what I wanted, more of a chameleon-like shape for the head. But here in this last version, you can see that backwards view. Again, the front and back proportions were super easy. It's that profile that was really difficult. Here you can see I redraw it in more of an upright, more of a childlike pose, and it's kind of portrays more of an innocence. I really love Eliezer's character because of all those markings along his body. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the characters while the painting time-lapse goes on in the background. So Arlen is, like I said, he is a guardian. And as a guardian, he has some sort of expectations as he's growing up to maintain this sort of balance and this good relationship with the forest around him and with nature. Arlen, as a young boy, was kind of mischievous, but never really got into too much trouble, and never really had the opportunity to get into too much trouble because he was constantly under this training of the druids to become a druid himself. And so he was found by an early age to be naturally gifted with magic, and so this potential within him really set him on a path in the future for him to become a druid. And this innate ability in himself was kind of exciting at first. But as time went on, Arlen realized that, magic was fantastic, but that adventure that he really craved, he sort of was lacking in his life. So Arlen is sort of obsessed at the beginning of the book with adventure and setting forth on this grandiose idea of what an adventure is. And very quickly in the book, he finds out that maybe adventure isn't quite what he heard about, or maybe it's not exactly what his grandparents told him. That adventures can be sort of hard and difficult. and that's sort of what makes them rewarding. You could see here that I am painting Eliezer now. Eliezer is a character that gets introduced a little early on into the book, but not quite at the very beginning. Arlen kind of stumbles upon him and actually saves him in the beginning of the book. Arlen is a lizard folk. He is one of the what I call the beast men in the book. So he is a child lizard folk who really is the innocence of the Forest Guardians. But not only is he the innocence, but he's sort of plays as Arlen's conscience at times. Very much a guiding light when Arlen is faced with difficulty. Eliezer is able to be that sort of innocent voice in the back of his mind that says, well, maybe we shouldn't do this, or maybe we should do this. I really love how Eliezer and Arlen play together, not only visually with this contrast of this blue-green lizard folk with this guardian who has this blue poncho and has very natural muted tones. So they are just pretty much opposites when it comes to their visual look, but also in their behaviors and attitudes. Eliezer tends to be a little more meek, where Arlen stands out and is a little more bold with his actions. So it's just really interesting to play those two characters off of each other. So I just want to talk a little bit more about Arlen and his struggles, really what goes on with this character and the Forest Guardians. As I said earlier, Arlen from a very young age was sort of destined to be a druid because of this innate magical talent that he has. And so you have this young boy who grows up and, he has his best friend Teague. And Teague and Arlen really just kind of go and do whatever they want to do up to a certain point. When Arlen gets sort of enlisted by the druids, he has a lot less free time. A lot of his days are spent with the druids and focusing on studying and his craft, which is learning magic and sort of learning how to maintain balance within the forest. So you sort of have this, he's sort of robbed of his innocence in a way, and not really having much of a choice in, what he does. And it's not that he doesn't like magic. It's not that he doesn't like the idea of becoming a druid. He actually grew up with his grandparents telling him stories, particularly his grandmother, of druids who would really do amazing things. And these grand stories really evolved into Arlen's mind as, this expectation of his future. And then later on in life, where the book picks up, he comes to realize that being a druid is sort of just another job within the forest. And, magic is impressive, but at the end of the day, the old stories are not quite true. And he really kind of, in his mind, he misses out on it a little bit and starts to sort of doubt whether or not he's supposed to be a druid. Until one day, and this is kind of where the book starts, he is about to graduate and become a full-blown druid. Up to this point, he is a pledgeling or druidling, whatever you want to call it, but he, up to this point, hasn't really experienced anything outside of his home village. Alright, so let's talk about what you're seeing here for a minute. This looks atrocious, and it's because it is. I really struggled with this face. I had something in mind that I wanted to see, and that I wanted to replicate, and I don't know why it took me so long to find it, but it really I kept struggling with going back and forth with how much of this expression I wanted to pull through. And so you can see here that I put paint down, I paint over it, and I put more paint down, and I paint over it. I try to go more bold with some black just to sort of punch in and lay down those details. This medium is it can be difficult to work with at such a small size, because once you put that paint down, it sort of just stains. But yeah, I really struggled with these proportions because I knew exactly what I wanted in my mind, but my hand wasn't quite letting me achieve that. So here you'll notice that I go back and forth, and I sort of ignore it for a little while, and then I come back to it later, just because like I said, I know what I want. I just, for some reason this day, I was not able to attain it, and this just looks a mess right now. So just, I guess, enjoy it for what it is. Yeah, so here you can see I actually just paint over the face, and I keep some of those tones showing through so that I have some landmarks from where to, place the eyes back and everything. But yeah, I just struggle with this for a while. Eventually I get it, and I'm starting to find it here by laying down those simple shapes again for the shadows and highlights. And really what I found is I have these eyes sort of slanting downwards towards the outside, and it just creates this sort of like innocent look in a way, this sort of inherent like sadness. And not that Arlen is a sad character, but he's self-reflective and a little too self-reflective at times, and so I feel like this gives him a forlorn expression without robbing him of that excitement. So I continue working on this painting. I want to talk more about these characters a little bit. Arlen and Eliezer embark on this grand adventure to discover the source of a long-forgotten shadow, this darkness in the world. And so they become kind of friends throughout this bonding experience as they sort of face all these struggles together and dangers greater than either one of them have ever experienced before. And so they are kind of thrust into this budding friendship, and really Arlen sort of acts as a stand-in family for Eliezer when his family is gone. He gets separated from his family, and that's where Arlen comes in and saves him from these creatures known as the Fell. And if you've watched some of my videos before, you'll know who the Fell are. They're basically sort of goblin-esque, long, twisted, forgotten elves. So here you can see I'm beginning to detail out Eliezer, and I just want to talk to you a little bit more about who Eliezer is and sort of the role he plays in this story. Before I mention that he sort of acts as Arlen's conscience throughout the story, but more than that, Eliezer has his own sort of growth throughout the book. And as their adventure progresses and they see more of the world and they encounter strange creatures and new people and scary beasts and things of that nature, Eliezer really grows as this childlike person in this story. In a lot of ways, he is the early years of Arlen. So Arlen sees a lot of himself in Eliezer. Eliezer is scared, but he is excited when he sees new things. When he gets to the Underling City, which, if you haven't heard before and watched any of my videos, the Underlings are basically they're dwarves without being dwarves. They're more of a less of a gruff, stereotypical Scottish dwarf, stereotype, and they're more of a naturalistic one with the earth, and they do mine, and they have this fascination with gemstones, and being underground, they don't have access to a lot of things that the surface dwellers, as they would call them, have access to. And so their two main exports are these gemstones, which they mine and they trade with and they use as a currency, and then also mushrooms, because mushrooms grow with abundance in the underroot. And so Eliezer has this moment where he goes into the Underling City for the first time, and he's just looking around in amazement because he's never seen jewels like this before. He maybe has encountered them before on jewelry, necklaces, stuff like that, but never at this magnitude and size. And the Underlings, when they mine out jewels, and they cut them and they shape them, so Eliezer it gets lost in this marketplace with Arlen, and he so desperately wants to take some of these stones, some of these jewels home with him to his parents. And so you have this really cute moment where Arlen and Eliezer are sort of just in this amazement and wonderment of this new place that they found together. So you can see here, I'm starting to play around with Eliezer, the shadows and details of his face. And here I'm getting down to his body as well. One thing that I sort of regret about this painting in particular is I started it off with a new type of acrylic. It's a Liquitex Basics fluid acrylic. And I thought it would sort of behave similarly to this acrylic gouache. However, I think it sort of came back to haunt me with applying this gouache over top of the fluid acrylic. This gouache just really didn't want to stick down as well, and so a lot of my edges get a little rough, and so I really have to struggle against that. You really have to let that gouache dry onto that surface, that acrylic surface, before you really move forward with any other detailing or washes or things of that nature. A lot of the colors started to blend together, especially here. But here I'm working on Eliezer's markings. This is one of the things that makes him stand apart from most other creatures. Is these lizard folk have, first of all, they're multicolored. You'll find lizard folk who are bright yellow like Eliezer, and more chameleon-like. And then you'll, in the same tribe or village, you'll see maybe one that's all bright green and it's got bright red markings. And I think that's just one of the things that I wanted to really do in this book and with these illustrations of these characters, is really just give a diverse and rich world of different characters and different races and everything to sort of play around with. Not only because it makes it fun for me to paint, but I think it just gives a wider variety of and a cast of characters for people to sort of attach to and admire. So Eliezer here, yellow with these brown spot-like markings. And so he has this like sleek belly, and he's got these little talon toes as well. And these eyes, especially when I get to detailing the eyes out, you'll see that the eyes themselves are sort of a black color, and so they don't have a whole lot of light tones or anything in like an iris, so to speak. But you really get a lot of color in the reflections off of that glossy black eye. And so I played around with a lot of like greens and blues and sort of just tying in, colors from Arlen into Eliezer as well. Now, one reason that I put a green ground onto this background was so that the characters will not only stand out a little bit, but most of the book is going to be in this sort of dark mid-tone green, at least in the first half and second half, and then you'll have some areas where they are deep underground. So a lot of the times these characters are going to be up against a dark background. So not to get too technical here, but you can see how that I'm adding this purplish red. This is actually just a contrast shadow for that yellow color. I played around with a digital version of this color combination in Procreate on the iPad. And I fell in love with it. It really adds a sort of warmth to Eliezer's character. Here you can see that I'm adding some color in the shadows and into the eyes as well. Thank you so much for watching. I had a great time creating these character turnarounds and sharing a little bit more about these characters with you. Just a heads up, on April 17th, this coming up Monday at 7 p.m., I'm going to be going live on Facebook and possibly Instagram as well. and just sharing a little bit more information about the book, the Kickstarter project, I'm going to take some questions as well. So if you have any questions about this book, about this story and these characters in particular, about my art process and the style, I'd love to answer those questions for you. But in the meantime, I just thank you for watching and enjoy the final result.